Hey there. I hope you're excited about this painting. This is the basic drawing, and when you draw it off, you can trace it off. There are several methods to trace it off with. You can take your template, and it's going to print off on a piece of paper, and just say this was the paper. You could rub pencil all over it, or you could rub chalk, a colored chalk all over it, lay it down, and then trace over the lines that you, when you lay it back down over your canvas, you're just going to take something sharp and hard and stiff and firm, like a pencil or pen or anything like that, and you're just going to trace over these lines. And then lift it up and your image will be on there. You can also use a transfer paper, tracing paper, graphite paper. All those things are great methods to trace it off with. If you have any issues at all, please let me know. I'll be glad to help you. Now, I just drew mine off with pencil, and then I came back in here and did it with my charcoal, but I only did it with charcoal so you would be able to see it and see the lines well enough to draw off. Now, listen, when I draw these things off, they are only a guide. They are not set in stone. None of my lines, especially these sunflowers and these roses, that's only a guide for me to get started. We can add to it. We can take away. We can have this circle here. It can be much larger. In fact, it probably is going to be. It's just for me to get my placement. When I like to start a floral arrangement, I like to get 3 big things in there first. You get your big things and you add your smaller things in around it. So I have a few leaves, one here, one there, a few up there, and then some greenery that comes down out of it. And I will probably add some more in there. I have my container here. And then the rest is to make up as we go along. And we can put a tabletop just by coming across there. Just a simple line, tabletop, or you could round it off, or you don't even have to do one. You could come down this far. You just do not want to divide it right in the center of the canvas. So anytime you can offset something, even that base is offset just a little bit, and it's going to make it more appealing to the eye when you look at it. Alright, so we're going to get started painting this. Feel free to stop the video at any time, take a break, paint a little bit. I do work fast, and I work fast for a reason, because I don't want it to be perfect. I want the less perfect, the better. I love messiness, and the more messy, the better for me. So if you're not that person, and if you're not that person and you're seeing me for the first time, it may bother you a little bit. Don't let it, do your thing. Unless you're wanting to loosen up, I suggest for you to try to work a little faster. Try to allow yourself to be messy, and tell yourself this is just a process, and it is a practice piece, and you don't have to get it right off the bat. And if you want to paint onto your mixed media paper in a notebook, that takes some of the pressure off. You don't have to paint it on a canvas. This is an 8x10 canvas. If you want to enlarge your pattern, you can go to blockposter.com, and you can enlarge this pattern to a great big, huge canvas if you want to go that big with it. So you do it your way. If you don't like anything I do, please adjust it and do it the way you want to. This is not set in stone in any way, shape, or fashion. And I want you to make it yours, and you don't have to follow me to a T. If you want to loosen up more, if you're trying to loosen your style up, use a larger brush, work faster, take your glasses off, and try not to get it just like what somebody else has done. That is my first tip I could give you always. Don't feel like you have to have it just like somebody else. In fact, it's way better if you don't do it identical to somebody else. You're never going to find your way and your style when you're trying to be somebody else. So try. And if you're starting out, you're just beginning, you're going to need to do it, you know, and try. But don't be upset if it doesn't turn out just like mine. It's still going to be really pretty, and it's going to have your touch to it and your hand to it and your personality. So embrace those things that you are given, that God has given you. Embrace those. We always want to be somebody else, but we can't be. So embrace what you have been given and go with it. And that's what I've done. I like messiness. I am messy, so I just like, okay, I'm embracing that and I'm going with it. All right, so we're going to get started now. And I'm going to use a flat brush most of the time, and a round brush at some point. So a flat brush, I don't go by brush sizes. I just don't do it. I use cheap brushes because I leave them in water all the time and they ruin, so I don't even buy the nice brushes. And that's a pencil laying right next to that so you can tell size. And those are the main brushes that I will use throughout the whole thing. I may go up for my background. I may go up to a flat brush about that size right there. And now listen, I don't want you to get caught up on paint either. Don't worry about what brand do you have. What kind of paint do you have? I use every paint there is to use. If it's house paint, I'm going to use it. If it's craft paint, I'm going to use it. If it's heavy body, thick acrylic paint, I'm going to use it. I will use every brand there is. Now, I'm going to tell you, there is a difference, but if you only have craft paint or house paint, use it. The more you do, the more you can do. And so the more you get into painting, the nicer the paints you can buy. So start with craft paints. And then you can go on up to heavy-bodied acrylic paint. And this is a student grade here. So there's better paint than this. Costs you more money. It is worth the money. But if you can't do it right now, then you use craft paints. And if you want to make your craft paints thicker, I should turn it this way. You can use a gel medium in it, like a matte gel medium, and it will take some of that shininess out of it as well. It's not as much shiny in this as it is heavy body paint. But you can mix these two together and it will thicken your paint and make it go on and have more texture on your surface. But you don't have to. You can just use craft paint. This is where I started. This is where I am now. And I have this little jewelry container that instead of pouring my paint out on a palette, I put it in there. And then I have a wet sponge and it keeps it from drying out and me wasting so much paint. Okay, so we're going to get started. And let's start with our sunflowers first. Let's go ahead and get our sunflowers on here. And then we will move on from there. Now, I'm not trying to get perfect petals or anything like that. This is more of an abstract-y, loose painting, and it's not going to be just right. I'm going to move my canvas over so you can see me mix and paint right here on my glass. And I'm going to put a mustard color down, and remember, your colors do not have to be identical. Anything that's a little mustardy works. And I'm going to take a little chocolate brown, and I like to mix those two together to make it just a little dark. I like to work dark to light, so I'm making that just a little bit darker right there. I'm going to need more, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out some more and mix it up. You do not have to be identical as long as you have something. If you don't have a mustard color, you can start with a bright yellow and add the brown to it, and you'll end up with this. You can even add a little orange in there as well. Alright, so I'm going to start here, and I'm going to just come in, and you see I'm not I'm not filling in like you would a coloring book. I'm just kind of loosely throwing from the center out like that, and you kind of whip your wrist to go outward, Don't worry if you go into another flower. Right here I'm just going to stop because I do want that rose to be right in there, so I'm just kind of stopping at the edge. So I basically have those petals going out, and I'm coming on this flower and I'm doing the same thing. Remember I said I use the drawing as a guide, and I don't always fill in the lines. I'm not one of those people that likes to paint inside the lines. I like to be messy and fun and loose and crazy and paint outside those lines as often as I can. I love to do this with the palette knife. It's really fun. So if you're really interested in doing any of that in the PJs and Paint Academy, we paint with the brush and we paint with the palette knife, and we do mixed media. We dabble in a little watercolor. We just do it all so that you can really find what speaks to you and what you like, and then we go from there and build off of it. So you really try to find what it is that when you are scrolling past something that really screams your name. What screams your name? What speaks to your heart? And those things are going to lead you down the path of finding your way and your style. Alright, so I'm going to wipe my brush off some. I rarely wash my brush off in water. I just like to I keep paper around and I just wipe it off. And now I'm going to grab just the mustard by itself. The yellow ochre is the name of it. I'm just going to grab it by itself, and I haven't waited on anything to dry. You can if you want to, if you're worried about it blending in too much. A lot of times if you are rubbing, it's all going to blend in and make one color. And I just want you to notice I'm not rubbing. I'm throwing it on here and I'm getting more, and I'm moving on to the next section. If you rub like this, it's all going to be one color, and that is not what we're going for. So we want to just pull from the center. We're not trying to go over the identical same place as we went before. We're just throwing it on here. The quicker you throw it on here and don't think it does, let me go back up. The faster you work and the quicker you throw it on there, you have less time to overthink it. And that is the problem most people have, is they overthink it. So we don't want to do that. We just want to throw it on. We're going to layer on top of layer. They can be in between. They can be on top. Wherever they land and wherever they end up is where they're going to be. You do need a good bit of paint for this. I'm going to get right in those little crevices, right around in there. Alright, and we're going to let that dry for a minute. You can dry it with a hair dryer if you want to, and then we're going to come up with a lighter layer on top of that. So I dried it just a bit, and I'm wiping my brush off again. I'm getting the mustard off, the yellow ochre, and I'm going to grab a bright yellow here. And I am going to come in and do the same process. Pulling from the center out. Alright, and now at this point, I'm going to mix the yellow ochre the mustard, the, you know, lighter mustard with the bright yellow, because those two mixed together create a beautiful color, and I'm going to add white to it. And just mix those two together. Don't be afraid to play and mix your paint colors, because you're just going to be amazed at what you come up with. And I'm going to come in as a softer yellow. Just going to come in right on top. Trying to stop short of the coming as far out as I was, and that will look like it is layered and layered and layered. You've got petals in the back, petals in the front. But I'm whipping it on there so it's more jagged on the edge when they come out. Longer strokes. And then you can even go lighter with that. Like where the light is going to be, I'm going to have the light coming from the right side. So I'm going to add more white to this one little section right here. And I'm going to add lighter petals right over on the right hand side. Like that. Alright, and I'm going to wipe my brush off and get all that mustard paint. And now I'm going to grab the chocolate brown, burnt umber, any dark brown. If you don't have a dark brown, you can take your light brown and add black to it, and that will darken it up. So I'm going to come around here, and I'm just going to wiggle. I'm just wiggling around because I'm not wanting that circle to be a perfect circle. I'm wiggling it out into the yellow a little bit. And I'm just going around that left side and down bottom. Doing the same thing over here. And when I get to my petals, I kind of come in between so I don't totally cut them off. I don't want to cut off the petals with a straight line, so I kind of wiggle in between my petals right there. And now I'm going to grab some of that darker color we had mixed up here earlier. I'm going to have to squirt it with a little water to freshen it up. I still have that chocolate brown on my brush. I'm grabbing some of that, and now I'm going to come around and let me add a little more mustard in my brush too. I'm coming in here and dabbing, dab, dab, dab. Right on the right hand side. You can wiggle, you can dab, whichever way works best for you. And now I'm going to grab just a touch of white to that mixture. And I'm going to add a little more light to this side, because that is where the light is hitting it. I made that up in my head. When you start painting from scratch, you got to figure out where your light is going to be coming from. If you're going by a photograph, you're pretty much going to be handed that information. Alright, so we've got that little light, and you can always go a little bit lighter by just grabbing more white on your brush without even washing it off. I rarely wash my brush off. I love surprise colors coming out of my brush. So if any other color happened to be on there and got in that, I would be totally happy with that. Does not bother me one bit. I love happy surprises. Alright, so we're going to wipe that brush off. And I'm getting a lot of that off, as much as I can. And we're going to start on our rose petals. But before we do that, I'm going to clean off my palette, and then we'll get started. Right. I've got a clean palette. I just used water, my squirt bottle, and my best friend, and a paper towel. Alright, so now we're going to come in and do these little roses that I have. And I've covered up a lot of them now with my little strokes, and that is totally okay. They can end up being on top, or they can be behind. So it depends on whether you paint the rose completely right here on this section as to whether that is in front or behind. If you allow these petals to be on top of that rose, that's going to put your rose behind. And if you put your rose on top of these sunflower petals, that is going to put your flower in front, which is totally fine either way you do it. So don't worry about that. It will just put one flower in front of another, and that's no big deal. Alright, so we're going to have a reddy pink color. So I'm going to start with a red first. I need some, my paint's drying out in my container. So I'm going to start with my red, bright red there. And then I'm going to add a little blue to it. So I have, this is called phthalo blue, but you can use any dark blue. Any navy blue will work. Now, if you go too far, it's going to be purple when you mix these together. So I don't want it to be, you know, 100% purple. I just want a deeper, darker burgundy red. So I'm just going to come in here and dab in the center. I'm not trying to get that outlined, fill down like a coloring book. I'm just dabbing in the center because remember, I like it to be more loose. And now you can wipe your brush off. And we'll just grab that red. Even if you still have some blue in your brush, it's totally okay. For this part, I'm just mainly coming in here kind of like the coloring book and filling in the space. I'm just putting it in. Like I'm just placing my brush down so that it gets in that area. And right in here, I will do the same thing. And it's okay. Like that just got on my yellow paint. I'm okay with that. It does not need to be a perfect round circle. So if you get outside of your lines, that is good too. And these don't even have to be roses. They are just going to be another kind of flower. So don't get in your head that that's what it has to be. We are touching these two, and we're going to touch all these together, but they'll be separated a little bit when we put the next layer on. Going to add a little bit down in there. I think where these little negative spaces are, you could do green, or you could add some red down in there like you're looking through the back side of the flower arrangement, because there's always flowers on the other side. So you need to be able to look through there. Notice I'm not really coloring in the lines. I'm just kind of placing it in there. Roughly, too. Very loosely. And then if I have any white, I'm kind of push it into that white as well. Alright, and next we are going to grab a, let's see what we get right there. By mixing white with that, we get a rose color because we had that deep red in our brush already. And let me wipe that off and I'll show you what you get if you just add the white to that. Now that's a deeper rose burgundy color, but the more white you add to that, the more it's going to go in that direction. Any of these work. And you can use this color pink. You could use a hot pink. whatever color you want to, just go with it. And I just mix these up, and I'm just going to go with those because I have them right here on my palette. And I'm just placing brush strokes down with the side of my brush. I have my brush turned sideways, and I'm starting at the center, and I'm just coming in and putting strokes in. Some are curved, some are a little more curved than others. Some are kind of straight, and I work from the inside out. I'm not overworking it, I'm just throwing it on there. I come outside of my roses as well, like that one right there. I totally came outside of it, so you do not have to stay in the line. And we're going to do that all the way around that flower. And now we're going to grab more white. I didn't mix it in here with that pink. I'm bringing it down here and mixing it up. I still have that red in my brush and the pink, other pink, so it's still a shade of pink. It's just lighter. I'm going to hit on the top surfaces because that is where my light is coming from, remember. Gonna mix a little more up. And remember, I'm not rubbing, I'm not filling in, I'm putting it down. Not trying to have it just so. Alright. So now I'm going to wipe my brush off. And we're going to come in and start on we're going to do our vase next, and then we're going to come and do our greenery, because that way the greenery can just come in right on top of the vase. And I'm going to get rid of my paint here, and I'll be back in a minute. Okay, so my vase is like a galvanized and ivory type vase, and or container really. So I'm going to pull out a little black and some white, and I'm going to come in and do these little areas here and this area up here first. So I'm just kind of mixing those two together. Well, you can't see that. Hold on, there we go. The black and the white right there. I'm not mixing it up 100% because I like to see the variation in color. So I'm not going to sit here and rub and have a solid gray color. I just put it in there and kind of rub my brush through it just like that. And now I'm going to come in here and put it in. And I'm turning my brush sideways to get beside these flowers. I'm not trying to get a perfect filled in job. The more paint on your brush, the better for this. So you can get by your edges, like right here, you can do one long flowing stroke and get by there, but then I come back in here and put these strokes on top. I turn my brush sideways to get beside those flowers, and if you cover them up, it's not the end of the world. We can totally put those back in there. And now I'm going to do my brush strokes this way to kind of smooth that out a little bit. And now I'm going to come down and put that gray in the centers of these. This one, these on the end are really skinnier than those in the middle here because it is going around the back end. and so they get smaller as they go around, which gives you the look that it is curving. And I have used the same brush the whole time. Alright, we're going to come on, well, no, they're more ivory. The back side of that handle right there is gray. That area right there. And then this area right in there between those petals. Yours may be a little bit different at this stage. Alright, I'm going to wipe that off. I'm grabbing my white. Remember, I have gray in my brush and everything. And my white is contaminated in my container, so it has every color in the rainbow in it. But I'm going to grab just a touch of that mustard yellow on the tip, on the corner of my brush. And a little bit more. Because I want it to be a creamier yellow, a creamier white than a bright white. So I mixed that yellow ochre, the mustard color, into my white. And I'm going to come in here now, come across here. Remember, I'm going for a loose style. I don't want it to be just right. Coming across that line there. And now I'm coming down, turning my brush sideways, and I'm coming down. Whether I go into my gray or not is just whatever happens, happens. If you go in there, you go in there. If you don't, you don't. I don't try to not go into it. I'm okay with going into it. And then I touch up the, the little corners that I come around. This is what happens when you're wanting to be a little more loose with things. You allow those things like that to happen and not try to be just right. Okay, and now I just want to take a little touch of brown, the chocolate brown on my brush. And I'm going to come right along the edge because I want it to be darker down here. And then I'm going to do my left side the same way, right there. And I'm going to pull it in this direction. And maybe darken right in between these two. Alright, I'm wiping my brush off because I'm going to go back to this creamy area, and I'm going to just kind of do mainly a dry brush across that gray. I don't want it to blend in with that gray. I just want it to kind of lay there on top. And now I'm going to get my little brush with some, I'm going to mix up my gray to be a darker gray right there, a charcoal gray. And I'm going to just come and kind of line this area here. You can thin that out with a little water and it will flow so much easier. So I'm going to grab a little water off of there. I sprayed it with my spray bottle. Remember to stop the video as often as you need to take your time and do this. Don't feel rushed. But at the same time, don't spend 3 hours on one little section. Now I'm going to come down the left side of those areas here, the gray areas, and then I'm kind of blending it out into the mid section. And then I'm doing under it on the bottom part. I'm adding a little water to it so it kind of blends in easier as well. And I'm just going to take some of that charcoal and just darken that left side a little bit more. And then the underneath. I'm also going to come across here. I keep grabbing a little water with mine. It just flows so much easier. If you're doing heavy bodied paint, you don't have to do that because it's, I mean, if you're doing craft paint, you don't have to do that because it's already thin enough. I just like these sections to be a tad bit darker, so I'm not going to rub it in so much. Right in there. Right there needs to be a little darker. Alright, now I'm going to, grab some of this original gray with a little bit of that darker color. Right in here needs to be darker. Right up under the flowers. Just kind of bringing a little shadow in there. Right there. And now we can wipe that off. And I'm going to grab the ivory color that we mixed up, and I'm just turning my brush sideways and pulling it in. Then I'm going to add some to this right side over here. And I'm kind of going to come into that charcoal gray a little bit so it's a little messy. I got a lot of water in my brush when I did that. I'm going to take a little gray and then shade right inside on that handle. Just putting it right inside the handle and right inside that handle. Going to take a little bit of the white I have on my palette and just kind of hit a dry brush. There's very little paint on my brush. It's called a dry brush because I wiped most of the paint off. Hitting a little white on it like that. Just because the light will be hitting it, and right there as well. I'll add a little white to this area. Dry brush. I've gotten the paint and most of it's wiped off. Coming across there. And I'll hit that one little spot right there. Alright, and that's it for the container, and we will do the greenery next. Okay, so now we are going to come in with our greenery and get that done. I like to take that same brush, the same flat brush. I have a chartreuse green color, but you can start with a Kelly green. We're going to make an olive green color. So if you have Kelly green, you can add a little chocolate brown and a little mustard to it and make an olive color. And if you have this, you can add a little brown. Ooh, I added way too much brown to it to make an olive color. There's no right or wrong olive color. You can use either one. And I'm just mixing this up because that's just my favorite one. And I'm going to come in here and do the leaves. That leaf got out of hand. I came in from the outside and put a little point on it, so it made it look more like a leaf. You can scale down if you feel more comfortable using your smaller brush. And now we can add a little yellow to that to brighten it up just a little bit. You don't always have to use white. Add a little yellow, and just on the right hand side of that and the very top, if like this one has more of a top to it. Right there. And then you can add a little more, you can add a little white to that now. And see what you get when you mix your colors. You just get all yummy stuff when you start mixing. So don't be afraid to mix your colors. I'm just kind of throwing it up on the top and the right hand side. One more layer of light. Alright, and now we're done with that green. We're going to do a different green for our greenery that comes down this way. And feel free to add any more leaves you want in there. They don't all have to be a perfect little leaf shape. As you can see, this one kind of went out and down. That one went out and up. And these are your regular. And they're not even really truly defined as leaves. They are just green in there. So it looks like leaves. It's not filled in 100% color book kind of greenery. Alright, so I'm going to wipe this off so that you can see what I'm going to do next. I could easily have used that green that I mixed up over here, but I'm just going to wipe that off and grab another green. I'm going to start with my Kelly green color. Called bright green, and I'm going to grab some dark blue, and I'm going to mix those together right here. And I'm coming, you can come out and down. That'll kind of give you more of a jagged edge. And if they're kind of fat with this brush, so if you want them skinnier, you can use your little round brush. You can have them more jagged, or you can have them more defined. If you want the skinnier brush to have them more defined, whichever way you want to do that. I changed that from that line there. I didn't want it really coming out of there like that. I'm adding one more here. Like I said, you can add to this as much as you want to. You can have as much greenery coming out as you want. These can get skinnier when we start adding our background, because the background's going to touch it and it's going to mess it up on purpose. And it can make those skinnier and not so fat. So if you got one you really don't like, just let it be for now, and you can come back in here and add to it. You can always add to it. Alright, so now let's see what happens when we add some mustard in there instead of bright yellow. Alright, so that gives us another version of an army green, olive green color. I'm going to add that right on top. I'm not pushing it in because I don't want it to go into the background. I want it to kind of sit on top of there. I'm not doing a bunch of strokey strokes. I am just throwing it on in one or two little strokes. If it's long, I'll get one stroke in and then do another stroke. You can come in here and do berries. You can do sticks. All kind of little things in there. You know, I just washed my brush. I don't know what I was thinking. I don't normally do that, but I did. Not the end of the world. You can totally do that too, but I didn't need to. I'm going to grab white with this green, and I'm going to come back and hit the top of it. I'm not so sure I love all those, but we're going to go with it for now. Alright, and now we want to come into our background. And your background can be anything, any color you want to. I got this green right here. I'm just going to come on down here and just do a shadow at the bottom of my vase. I'm going to come out from it a little bit. You see how I'm coming in that direction. My light is coming from over here, so it's going to be shadowed in this direction. Right up next to the vase, and sporadically come outward with it. I'm wiping my brush off, and I want to grab some of the pinks that I had up there in the top a little bit. So I'm going to grab some red, a little blue, and then some white. I'm going to just grab some of that and put it down in here. And I'm rubbing it right next to my vase, really touching the vase with it. I'm going to come across. I'm just back and forth with my brush strokes. Get my edges really well. And this part, I'm not even going to try to get it truly defined with a perfect line coming across. I like it to be less perfect. Working on my edges. Coming up in there like sporadically like I did on the other side. I'm not trying to get a solid. If I'm rubbing it a lot, it's getting solid. Can have some darks in there. In fact, it'll look better if you do put some of those darks in there from the original blue and red mixture. Especially on this side. So I mixed up a little bit more and made that a little darker over here. Because remember, it's kind of shaded. So I want it to be darker than this side over here. I'm not trying to do a solid sheet of solid color. The more variation in color, the better. So that's why I just kind of put these brush strokes in short little strokes. Now I'm going to grab more white on my brush, and I'm coming back and lightening up this. But as you can see, I'm not doing a solid sheet of paint. I'm doing little short strokes so that my brush strokes are seen. I like this look. This is the look I love, so it's why I do it. If you don't like it, then you can have it be more solid. I like to scribble in here. It just adds more texture. You just take the opposite end of your brush and you can just come in here and scribble away. No rhyme or reason whatsoever. Wiping my brush off, I'm going to take a little bit of that deep dark blue and mix it in with that green a little bit, and I'm just going to darken this right up under here a little bit more. So always darker right up under it. And it can blend into this red burgundy color. It doesn't have to be just opposite, I mean separate. It can kind of blend together. I do all that while it's wet. Alright, now I'm wiping my brush off, and we're going to do the top part. But this time I'm going to grab, I don't have space here, so let me wipe off some of this so you can see what I'm going to do. I just wipe my palette and then I squirt it with my water. This is just an old picture frame glass that I have down here. It just makes it easy to clean and do my videos with. Okay. Take my same brush and I'm going to grab some of that blue and I'm going to grab white, and I'm not mixing it up. I'm just going to grab both, the lighter color mainly, and I'm turning my brush sideways and I'm coming to my subject, meaning greenery, flowers, whatever, and I'm touching it. Try not to have them be perfect. Like if there's not a lot of space right there, I don't care. I just go right in on top of it. And I make my way. It's like I'm pushing my way in. Right there, I'm just going to put a little stroke. I'm getting rid of all the white canvas. Coming down into here. If some of that pink color comes up in there, that's totally okay with me too. You can keep adding more white if you want to have a little lighter, or if you run out. Any little negative space you have in here, you can just use the corner of your brush. Come down. The less strokes, the better when you're coming beside there. Just make your way in. Right there, I wanted it to be separated. I had them too close, so I just turned my brush sideways and came down beside it. And that separated those two pieces of greenery out. Out here, I come in with a little more white on my brush and just kind of put those strokes in, trying not to get perfectly solid background. I don't like a flat background, but that is just me, and you can do it whatever way you want to. Here, I'm turning my brush sideways and coming beside the subject. I touch the subject. I don't worry about it messing up a petal or anything like that. I love, love, love that look. Here I'm coming, there's a lot of choppies right there, so I'm just kind of wispying it in toward that area. And I take whatever it gives me. But I do get rid of the white. Once I do that, then I'll come back in and, you know, do my strokes like this on the outside area. And just kind of turning my brush sideways and getting rid of that white. Whatever happens in there happens. I'm getting rid of some of that greenery there. If the greenery smears, then so be it. It looks really good mixed in your blue. I promise, let those things happen. You may just really love what they look like. Don't feel like they're accidents. They're not accidents. They look really good. We don't have to stay in the lines. We don't have to do what we were told in kindergarten. Be a little loose and abstracty and get outside those lines and make a mess. Just make a mess and embrace that mess. I'm going to come and get my edges right up here. I'm wiping my brush off. I'm going to grab more white. And I'm just putting it at the edge of that blue. So it's a lighter version. It's not white. It's just a light, light blue. And now I'm just going to come in the main sections and lift that up one more level. Working quickly so that I don't try to cover up this background and get between those lines just right. You can let this dry a little bit if you want to. If it just blends in too much, you can let it dry a little bit and then come and do this, and it won't blend in a whole lot. And that allows that blue to show really good around those flowers. I want to come back and do one more layer down here on the bottom. So I'm going to take that red. I've already got some blue in my brush. Remember where we did this? So I'm taking the red. I'm going to get some more white. I'm going to lighten that up considerably from what it was. And I'm just going to come back in. Even though I scribbled in it, I can scribble in it again. It's totally okay. I just like to lift that up one more layer. I'm going to come right around this corner. It's not where it's totally shaded, but it's out from it a little bit. I just wanted it to be a little bit lighter. And then I can scribble in it again, do whatever I want to. You can even scribble in the top part. We're going to come back when it dries, and we're going to add a few little sticks in there. Alright, so now we're going to do some little brown little wooden sticks. We're going to do some doodling and dress it up a little bit. Still, I'm not a big lavender fan, so this is not my favorite, but I kind of would like it to go toward a more of a rose color. But let's see, let's take, I mean, we can have it be whatever we would like. If you like it this color, leave it. If you don't, you don't. I'm going to take a little bit of this pink first and just not trying to cover up that lavender 100%, but I'm just going to tone it down some. I'm going to add a little white with that too. And that softens it up and gets rid of some of that. And I like that better. I didn't try to cover it all the way up, and you can still see those little strokes down in there coming into that shadow a little bit too. Alright, now I want to come in with my little round brush, and you can go as little with it, as small as you want to on your little round brush. Let's have an average size, but I like to use the very tip of the brush. So if you take a little chocolate brown, if you are using craft paint, that is good. If you are using heavy body paint, you may want to thin it out a little bit with a little water. So I like to squirt a little dab of do-ya right up here. Kind of mix it in just with the tip. It's all you're going to use. If you lay your brush down, you're going to get a fat line. That is way too fat for what we're going for. So we only want to use the tip, and we want our paint thinned out a little bit. Not super thin, not super wet. Alright, so you just come in and just put like random places. You can kind of do it very thin. You're not putting pressure down. You don't want to put pressure down. And this can come over the top of that greenery too. It does not have to be behind it. It can be right in on top of it. So I just do really thin lines, and then I will come off of those little lines with little branches. Just like this. And then you can add branches off of those branches. No pressure. You don't want to put any pressure down. Very lightly. Your brush is barely touching the surface. And sticks are sporadic, so they're not all going to be the same. Can even have one coming up from the center here. I put two right there. I'm going to have one coming down. Alright, and I'm thinking it's dangerous when I think. Very dangerous. I was thinking of doing a berry or two, but I think this will be okay as long as we come in and do some doodling and stuff. I think that will be sufficient. So let's do that. Alright. Now I like to doodle. I love to doodle actually. I love Uniposca paint pens. These are like the very best paint pens I've ever used. And you do not want to do it on a wet surface. You want to make sure it's dry. You don't want to ruin your paint pens because you pay money, good money, for these Uniposca paint pens. And they come in all sizes and all colors. This is a thin one that I have here. You can buy these in variety packs, the black and whites. Those are the main colors I use all the time. So you can buy a variety pack of different sizes with the black and whites in there. And then you have them for whatever you need. They even go up super size, like poster board, you know, to paint on poster board and that kind of stuff size. But the smaller ones are going to work best for smaller pieces of art. I also like to use the Jelly Roll pens. These are super fun because they're so dainty. Very, very dainty lines that you get. So you can get some really good scribbles in your paintings without it just really overwhelming the painting. And I love both of these. I love... Even, depending on what I do, I go on up in size with the Uniposcas. But for this one, I'm just going to use those. See, this is a larger size. Depending on what I was using it for, I would use this in this painting. But for right now, we're going to use the smaller ones. Here's the big honking one I was telling you about with the big wedge. I rarely ever use anything that big. Okay, except for door hangers and stuff like that, but we're not doing that right now. We're doing artwork. Alright, so remember, you want it to be dry when you do it. I like to just randomly scribble. Wherever my heart desires, there's no rhyme or reason. Everybody's like, where do you decide to scribble? Wherever my heart tells me to scribble. That's what I do. So just play. The more loose you are with it, the better it's going to be. Don't feel like you're doing anything wrong. and just play, just like you would. You know how in the old days you're sitting there talking on the telephone and you're doodling. Doodle, doodle, doodle. I want you to do the same thing like this. And you can come and just add little dots if it shows up. It's very tiny, so you can barely see it. I'll show you the difference in using the Uniposca. Is brighter. You can use either one. Just adding some little insides here, just because I can and I want to. No other reason. Here I'm going to kind of come in and do like a little hashtaggy kind of look. I'm not trying to fill in the whole surface. I'm just kind of throwing it on there. Wherever it lands, it lands. Wherever it doesn't, it doesn't. And I just keep going. You can do some little dots in there if you want to with it. On that right side especially, because it's lighter over there. The white can overtake it really fast. So, you know, I feel like it's brightened that up a lot more than I really wanted it to. So I'm going to come in here and just add some little baby's breath to kind of, and I'm just doing dot, dot, dots, and I'm just randomly putting a little selection of them in sporadic little places all around. They can be on top of other flowers. And that will balance out the white that I put in those sunflowers. And again, you do not have to do your flowers that way. Even coming out in here and doing some. Down in there. And remember, it's not just in a circle. It can come down and cascade. It doesn't have to be anything in particular. Alright, so I'm just going to kind of, sometimes it does not want to go over the heavy body paint. The little jelly roll pens don't. I'm just kind of scribbling in. Scribble, scribble. I just love the look of scribbles, and you may not, so you may not even want to do this at all, and that's totally fine if you don't. I'm going to come across there. Alright, and on some of these long pieces of greenery, I like to come in and do little veins in them. So I'm just going to come with my jelly roll pen and do little tiny veins. Some of them show up, some of them don't. Some of them don't come off very well on the paint. So I just take whatever it gives me and go with it. It was just fine before the scribbles, so you do not have to add the scribbles if you don't want to. It's totally a personal preference, and I just like them. And I just feel like it adds a little more to them. And they're not totally detailed 100%. You can barely even see some of them. You can take the black add anywhere you want to. I love it because it's so ultra fine. Oops, I just went into my wet paint. And then when you are happy with it, you like it, then you sign it. I'm going to add a little more scribble there. And be done. You can even scribble up in the background. Add little white scribbles up in there. Just gives it a little more motion. I like to have a lot of motion in my paintings. That's just a personal preference as well. Alright, so I really hope that you like it, and I want to see it when you get done with it. I'm going to brighten these up just a little bit. Sometimes they go deep down in there. Alright, so I want to see what you did. If you need help with anything, please don't hesitate to message me and ask me. I'll be glad to help you with anything. If you get stuck with something, email me at melissahowington@gmail.com. And that is Melissa with one L and two S's. melissahowington@gmail.com. And I'll be glad to help you. And I do want to see it, so please send me a picture of it when you get done. And play until your heart is content. Bye.